Well, we have just ticked over to the hour, so let's begin. And hello, everyone. It's great that you could all join us to celebrate International Women's Day. So I am absolutely delighted to be hosting a wonderful panel of four fantastic women leaders who I hope that you will find as inspiring as I do. So joining me today are Aiza Benyamin, Kartina Tahir Thomson, Marjorie Ngwenya, and Tonya Manning. And International Women's Day celebrates the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. So the day also marks a call to action for accelerating gender equality. It honours the achievements of women across all aspects of life, social, economic, cultural, and political, while advocating for gender equality. And the overarching aims of International Women's Day are to celebrate women's achievements through recognising and appreciating the contributions of women, highlighting their influence and successes throughout history and in the present day. And so to raise awareness of gender equality through shining a light on persistent issues like the gender pay gap, lack of representation in leadership roles, gender-based violence, and unequal access to education and opportunities. And also to mobilise action for equality through encouraging individuals, communities, and organisations to take steps towards creating a more inclusive and equitable world for women. Now, I would just like to introduce our panel to you. So firstly, Aiza. Aiza is the immediate past president of the Actuarial Society of Malaysia, where she championed diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives with a focus on fostering inclusion within the profession. She's also contributed to the global actuarial community as a co-chair of the IAA Takaful Working Group and as a volunteer for the International Actuarial Association. Aiza is a senior partner at Actuarial Partners Consulting based in Kuala Lumpur. With nearly 30 years of experience, Aiza has extensive expertise in valuation, pricing, M&A due diligence, capital adequacy assessment, model reviews, market feasibility studies, and IFRS 17 implementation. She's also served as an appointed actuary for both insurers and Takaful operators. Kartina. So Kartina is a president of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries, and she served on the IFOA Council for the past 7 years and was a member of its Audit and Risk Committee. She was also on the Board of Directors of the Actuarial Association of Europe for 4 years. Kartina is passionate about inclusion, social mobility and education, which she's channeled through her role as chair of the IFOA Foundation for the last 3 years. She has 25 years of experience in actuarial, risk management, governance and regulation. And as a senior director at WTW, she leads risk, regulation and governance initiatives. She's previously worked at a Big Four audit firm, the Bank of England, global insurance carriers and brokers, and held non-executive roles, including for an FTSE-listed company and a fintech firm. Marjorie. So Marjorie is a past president of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries and made history as their first person of colour and youngest president. Marjorie is a passionate advocate for diversity, equity and inclusion and conducts research on inclusive leadership and its impact on workplace outcomes. Marjorie is also an author. Her book, Empowered Evolution, guides readers to shift their mindset, discover meaning and thrive with momentum. Her executive career includes roles as Chief Strategist for Liberty Group and Chief Risk Officer for Old Mutual's African operations. She serves as a board member in for-profit and non-profit sectors and is an external member of the Prudential Regulation Committee of the Bank of England. Tonya. So Tonya is a past president of the Society of Actuaries and a past president of the International Actuarial Association. She's also a member of the IAA's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. She currently serves as a member of the American Academy of Actuaries Pensions Committee and as a member of the steering committee for the Conference of Consulting Actuaries Community for Women in Consulting. Tonya is the Managing Director and Chief Actuary for Gallagher's US Defined Benefit Consulting and Administration practice and a lecturer for Columbia University. She is passionate about the global actuarial profession. She seeks to strengthen the profession by expanding its reach to new places and new faces, doing away with the typical profile of an actuary. So welcome to you all, and thank you for joining me. So to start with, I'm going to ask each of you to briefly speak about your experiences in rising to your current positions, reflecting on any of the challenges that you may have faced and overcome, and any learnings or advice for others. And you might want to spend about 5 minutes each doing this. And I'm going to start with Aiza and then move on to Kartina, Marjorie, and then Tonya. So Aiza, over to you.
Hello, Bozenna. That was a long mouthful of everyone's experience. We're very proud women here. I'm a senior partner with Actual Partners Consulting. It's a boutique consulting firm out of Malaysia. 2005 would be my 30th year in this industry. So started work in 1995, graduated with an MSc in Natural Science at City University. When I qualified in 2002, I believe I was the first female actuary qualifying in Malaysia.
Wow.
So what was my experience climbing that career ladder? Firstly, for those who haven't been to Malaysia, there is actually less gender bias here. Working women are very common. They hold positions of importance. 30% of board members in Malaysia are female. So the business community is actually used to seeing women in their workplace. And I can also say, in other countries that I worked in Brunei, in Thailand, in Indonesia, in Sri Lanka, that it's also the same. Yeah. There may be, of course, pockets of bias, especially in some industries and perhaps at the very top round, but it's a good place to be, a good business environment to be. So in this environment, I must say, I'm talking to my fellow, colleagues, female, I wanted to hear their experience as well. So we're all very fortunate. That was less of a struggle for me to advance. I had to show competency. I had to pass the actuarial exams.
Yeah.
And learn to be comfortable to speak up and also sharing my perspective. And being a consultant, of course, there's that added pressure of being smart, appearing to be smart, and also being engaging. But however, I wanted to share, as a woman, there were two incidents in my career progression that I wanted to share with here that typically would not happen to men. So firstly, twice I had to move countries because I was following my husband who was being seconded overseas, right? So how my employer, my senior partner then was Zainal Abidin, how he responded was, he could have said, okay, bye. But how he responded was he looked at it as a business case. I had clients with me. So we, in 1998, and in an era of no virtual meetings, things were on teleconference. I was working remotely. So which worked well. Which worked well because time zones, so the international projects were ongoing for 24 hours because I'd be working on it, passing on onto the office, and they'd be working on it. So before you say I'm being too nice to my husband for following him across the world, it was also, I wanted to do this. It was also an opportunity for me to experience living in other countries. So it's something I wanted to do as well. Was that a career setback? In terms of compensation, I would say it was output based, so not really. So it worked well for everybody involved in business case as well. But the second thing that happened in my career was childbirth and just caring for children. I had my sons very late. My first son, I had him at 35 and the second son at 40. So, I was really, I waited a long time for the kids. So I was really eager to be part of their growing up. So I took some time off. So 1 year was on a reduced hours. Another year, I completely took time off. And this is the crux. This is, I feel, when my career stagnated, well, just for a bit, from just being away from the industry. So imagine, for example, in present day times, if you're leaving work for a bit now, and coming back when FR 17 is implemented, and it's a different landscape when you come back, right?
Yes.
So after that time off, it just took me a while to get my footing back. It was actually incredibly hard because you're away for so long. roll forward present time, I've made up for it. I'm now a senior partner, so it has worked out. I'm an equity partner, it has worked out. But in corporate talk, this to me, there's this family responsibility that you have of childcare. I think that's the cost of the broken rung of middle management, and also the reason for that gender pay gap. When, the career that you've worked very hard on, you had to take a short break and a step away from.
Yeah.
So I wish, there was, I was very fortunate. I had help with childcare, so I can come back home and have quality time with my kids while working. But what I didn't have was a structured return to work kind of programs. I wished we had that during that time. Yeah, so I'm going to hand it over back to you, Bozenna.
Oh, thank you. That was so inspiring hearing you, Aiza. And yeah, the challenges, I can relate to that too. I had a longer role, so it's,
We all
yeah,
can
it's
relate
really,
to
really
that.
hard. But now I'd like to pass to Kartina, and let's hear from you, Kartina.
Thanks, Bozenna. Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me here. So I wasn't sure how to answer this question because I could just rattle through kind of CV, but you've already done that, Bozenna. So I won't do that. But just to give some context in terms of the career that I have is it's very varied. So I have the triangle of experience of consultancy, in-house, and regulator, and also it's almost not typical. So it's almost, I follow what I wanted to do at that time, so what interests me. So for example, I joined a global broking company because at that time actuaries were, actually had the perception of actuaries is that we can't communicate, and I wanted to learn how to do that very, very impactfully. So where else can you go except a broking company where it's very important to have that relationship skills and relationship management. So I thought that's quite a good move. And then it was Solvency II, and I joined a London market Lloyd's syndicate firm as a CRO. And then somebody said, oh, let's, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to be at the Bank of England when Solvency II gets implemented. So I did that as well. So it's always kind of been driven by interest. But my observation around, your question around experience is, especially in the context of women in the workplace, is that it's got better, definitely. I mean, if I look at myself 25 years ago when I first started work, I think I was very naive, and I didn't really, you just assume that that's the way the world works, right? So, things like you're the only woman in the room, or you get taken to this is London market, by the way, taken to places that you in the name of team bonding, where you shouldn't really go for in a professional sense. So there's a lot of that, and then you just accept it. And I'm glad to see now that a lot of people there's a lot of awareness, and kind of the next generation actually have that base of what is good and what's not. And I think it's as a brown woman in the city, I've been in the city for 25 years, and it has gotten better. And I don't know whether it's a mixture of things have just moved on, there's more awareness, but also the fact that I'm older, and I'm a bit more experienced in these things. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would say is we have quite a lot of spotlight these days on allies and male allies specifically. But I have to admit, in my experience, I've always had allies, male allies and also female. In fact, all the movements that I had in my career predominantly was driven by males. apart from probably the last role that I have. So, you know, there is pockets of people who do want to support you. But if I think about kind of the challenges, I think it still happens. That's why we're here. You know,
Yes.
I just read the report, the World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap report for this meeting, and for gender parity, it's 134 years. You know,
Wow.
that's 5 generations,
That's crazy.
and that's beyond my, you know, my daughter's a lifetime. So it's a bit depressing when you think about it that way. But we have moved on quite a lot. But there is quite a lot still to do. You know, things like Me Too is still happening, you know, even at my age, you know, it still happens. Gaslighting is still happening.
Yes.
So I think that there is a responsibility for us to call it out, and highlight it. I think, you know, culturally, I come from a culture where women are supposed to be quiet and not speak up. But living in the UK, you have to, otherwise you know, I had to step out of that expectation and move forward from a speaking up perspective. But I'll stop there and pass back on to you, Bozenna, if that's all right.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, that's really interesting, Kartina. And you're right. We still need to all, no matter where we are in the world, speak up. We are all still, I think, facing the same challenges. So it's really interesting to hear your perspective. But I'm glad to hear you say that it hasn't been too bad as well. But I'd like to now pass to Marjorie and hear from you about your perspective.
Thanks, Bozenna. Hi, everyone. It's a real privilege to be with you here today. So when I think about the theme Accelerate Action, I immediately reflect on the journey I've had, because nothing about my career has felt like it's happened at the right pace. At times, things move too fast, opportunities, responsibilities, expectations, and before I was sure I was ready. At other times, they've moved too slow. The glass ceilings, the assumptions, the quiet but firm barriers that had me feeling like I had to prove myself over and over again. So I didn't set out to be an actuary. In fact, my first dream was to be a pilot. But somewhere along the way, I was drawn to actuarial science, partly because it sounded impressive and partly because it was such a mystery to most people. And largely because at the time, there were only 5 qualified actuaries in Zimbabwe where I was raised. And I thought, I could do it. Why couldn't I? And so off I went to the UK to study at the London School of Economics, a huge opportunity. But just a few months into my first year, my world was turned upside down. Zimbabwe's economy collapsed and my family could no longer support my studies overseas. And I had to leave university. And just like that, the plan that I'd had for my future was gone. And I won't lie, there was a moment where I thought, that's it, the dream is over. But something inside of me said, not quite yet. And fortunately, because I'd been born in the UK, I had the right to remain and to work. So I started working first in tax at Deloitte, while still holding on to the dream of qualifying as an actuary. And I was very, very fortunate that my manager saw something in me and took the chance on recommending me to the actuarial team. And that team made the exception to take me on without a degree, but it came with the condition you are going to have to prove that you can keep up. And so I worked and worked and worked. And 5 years later, I qualified as a fellow of the Institute of Actuaries. And notably, I was supported by older male colleagues who quite literally took a chance on me. And it gave me the mental frame early on that I'm supported in the workplace. Qualifying didn't make it any easier, though. And in many ways, it was just the beginning of a new challenge, recognizing that I was often the only one in the room. Time and time again, I found myself as the only woman or the only person of color or the youngest person in the room. And at first I tried not to notice, telling myself, just focus on doing a good job. But the truth is, when you are the only one, you don't have the luxury of blending in. And I quickly learned that competence wasn't enough. I had to be excellent, and I had to be consistently excellent, visibly and undeniably. I had to be really prepared, not just to contribute, but to justify my presence in many ways. So trying to prove over and over again that I deserved to be there. And then there was the way that people reacted to me being in these spaces. I was often assumed to be less experienced than I was. Sometimes my assertiveness was perceived as being too much. And I often felt that my competence or my qualifications for being there were questioned in a way that my male peers weren't. I internalized that for a time, second guessing myself. Was I really good enough? Maybe they were right to doubt me. And maybe I'd just been lucky to end up where I was. I didn't have a name for it then, but now I know it was what we call imposter syndrome. But despite all the doubts, I kept moving. I moved industries, I took on global roles, and I was very proud to be the president of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries in 2017-18. As the first person of color, as you mentioned, as the third woman, which really is quite something given it was nearly 200 years old, as the youngest president and as the first based outside of the UK. And what should have been a moment of pure celebration quickly hit me in terms of what I was taking on. I won't say it was an easy time, but it was really fulfilling and educational for me in many ways. Many, many ups and downs, but definitely a lot of growth. And so in short, if you've ever felt like you're the only one in the room, or if you've ever doubted whether you belong, if you've ever questioned your worth, I see you, I've been you, and I promise you that you are more than enough. Thanks, Bozenna.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Marjorie. That you have had an amazing journey, and I love hearing about your story there. So thank you for sharing that with us. And yeah, I think many of us have been there. The only one in the room like us. You probably, I mean, you've got the color thing. I don't have the color thing. Like I've got the woman thing for there. So it must be. I can't really imagine what it's like in your shoes.
Layers on. Yeah.
Really appreciate you sharing that. And let's move now on to Tonya. And Tonya, let's hear your story.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for letting me join this morning and talk a little bit about how I became an actuary. And I did not want to be a pilot, but like Marjorie, I did not aspire to be an actuary. I had other things in mind. But as life happens, when I was a senior in college, instead of going on to pursue a PhD, I needed to go home and stay with my father and kind of take care of him at that time. So I was left in this little small town with a math degree, and I answered a one ad, and the one ad ended up being for an actuarial position. And I do remember when they interviewed me, they're like, well, you don't seem to be very committed to this profession. I'm thinking, well, I'm not, but I will be. Just hire me. And they took a chance on me. And I think part of it was I had a lot of well-rounded kind of experience in college because I hadn't really focused entirely on just becoming a mathematician of some sort. So I fell into the profession, but then I also fell in love with the profession because it ended up being a very good match for me for my ability to use analytical skills and then also do a lot of different things and solving business problems and doing a little bit of programming, reviewing legal documents. It was all there, and it was very exciting. But my progress through the career was a little different than probably some of my male colleagues. I do feel I live in the southern part of the U.S., and as progressive as we may have been in the country or moving along and recognizing women, we were probably behind in my part of the country. And unfortunately, as I was developing through my career, I never once had a female mentor that helped me. I did have male champions, and that is honestly the only way that I was actually very critical for me to achieve what I have is by having a male leader who recognized and appreciated what I had to offer. So that was very key in me coming along. But one of the things that I learned being a female and not quite the same as what people were perceiving in their heads as the next leader was that I had to be very proactive in raising my hand and making it clear what I did want in my career and what opportunities I was looking for. Because a lot of times the assumptions were, well, she wants to be a manager, or, she wants to be, lead the projects, or she wants to be in the background. And that wasn't what I wanted to be. I wanted to be in the front and center. I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to be a lead consultant. And if I had not proactively raised my hands for opportunities internally, and also had the support of leadership from key people who championed me and supported me, that I would have had a different career path. Up until the very point of volunteering with the Society of Actuaries, I was actually nudged along by the person who was the chief actuary at the time. And I was very surprised and didn't think I had the experience. And I was a little bit early in my career, but that literally changed my life as well, because you have a lot of dynamics with your work, and they are going to have many different things that are going to influence your ability to progress. In the volunteer roles, a lot of times it's a little bit more open and willing to consider, especially if you're willing to raise your hand, as Bozenna knows. If you raise your hand, it's going to give you a lot more opportunities. And I was able to gain a lot of skills, but just as important, I was also able to kind of be exposed to a bigger world. And I got out of my little town in North Carolina and met people from every part of the country and eventually every part of the world working with the IAA. And that really helped me grow and appreciate and understand not just how I was different as I was going through my career, but how so many different people kind of progress and what they offer and bring to the table. As I was going through all of this, I did have to take risk and push myself. I heard a couple of you say I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I was ready. I went for it anyway, and I really had to take that stance. I was recently reading a book by that gave me something to think about. It says that you can think of discomfort, and that's what you have when you push yourself into a role that you're like, maybe I'm ready. But if you think of discomfort as currency, it's the price you pay to learn some pretty crucial things. And if I had not done that and gotten discomfort or uncomfortable in pushing myself to these new roles, I'm not sure I would have, well, I'm pretty sure I would not have progressed as quickly as I did. I eventually became the chief actuary for the firm that was not sure if they should even hire me. And I was one of I think the first female chief actuary for one of the large consulting firms in the US. Through my volunteer roles, I became president of the SOA. I think I was fourth female president, but ending a very long drought, I would say. And I think I was the third IAA president, but we have so many amazing women who have come along afterwards, so it's not as interesting of a stat as it was at the time. One of the things I'd say that was also important as I went through my career, that was a challenge, was finding my style as a leader, because I didn't have any female fellow actuaries in my practice that I worked with or mentored me. And even in volunteering in the profession, a lot of the leaders were men, and they had a very different leadership style. My style is not like that. I am very different in the way I approach and I handle things. And for a while, I felt like that made me less of a leader, because I didn't come in very, I would say, alpha male in my approach to leading. That's just not who I am. And I had to adjust I had to decide if I was going to adjust my style or just be who I was. And that took a while for me to kind of land on being comfortable with my approach and who I was as a leader. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tonya. And that's really, really interesting. And I certainly think that this is one of the advantages of having more women around now, that we can be more comfortable being ourselves rather than just being the only one, like you were saying, Marjorie. And when you're the only one, and you're just trying to fit in, it's very, very hard. But I think it's fantastic now that there are so many women leaders in the actual profession. And Kartina was saying this to me the other day, and it's fantastic to see. And the more there are, the easier it will get. And I think this will be great for everyone going forward. So now I've got some questions that people have given me. So I'd really like to ask you some of these questions. And I'm going to start with you, Marjorie. And so I've got a bit of a leadership theme right now. So I was just wondering whether you can speak to any personal experiences or challenges that you faced when breaking into leadership roles and how you overcame them.
Thank you. So one of the first, which I mentioned earlier, was imposter syndrome. And it's the idea that you do not deserve to be there. The sense of doubt that you have when you're occupying a role of responsibility. And to overcome it, I asked myself, what can I contribute rather than am I good enough? I asked myself, what are the facts and what are the fictions? So the facts are I have the qualifications, the experience to be here, rather than I don't deserve to be here or I'm not good enough. Another challenge I faced was early on being assumed to be less capable. And over time, I learned how to assert my expertise and how to demonstrate my credentials by being well prepared and by being confident in my contributions. So I'd say those are two of the main challenges that I experienced along the way.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you. And I think we can all relate to that as well. And yeah, just encourage us all to speak up. Yeah. Aiza,
Yes.
what do you believe are the most significant barriers women face when aiming for leadership and decision-making positions?
Talking about the glass ceiling.
Yeah.
Well, even in Malaysia, where, I've mentioned that it's not so bad here, things are not so rosy at the top. But more than 1/3 of women hold C-suite roles, but at the CEO level, it's about 1 in 10. So we've touched about the broken rung in the middle career. So fewer women actually get to the top smoothly without external help, especially with family commitments. But I also think that the bar for leadership for women is also set higher.
Yeah.
And for example, for every female CEOs that I've met, I know that they work incredibly hard. And more often than not, I think they even work harder than their male counterparts, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's because women are judged more harshly. So you have to keep proving yourself. For the same level of recognition, you have to be working harder and proving yourself. And this is a bit controversial, but I think another major driver that I see males getting to the top position is because of whom they know, right? Their network is stronger than ours. So it's harder for women to break into that boys club, if you like, because they all know each other from school, from uni or whatever. But we also, as women, we don't have that representation at the top. So we have less of a network.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we don't just lack representation, but also because we don't have that network, we don't have people. I mean, we've all been very lucky here, but we don't normally have people to advocate for us, to sponsor us for these top level jobs. So I think that would be, the two significant barriers that I bring up.
And they're very, very good points. And I agree. I do think that the bar is higher for women. And Marjorie spoke to that too, that, always having to prove being better than everyone else. So I think that is harder. And networking is so important, and having those people who can speak up. And Tonya spoke how it was always the males who were there helping her along the way. I mean, it would be great to have more females helping us all the way, and perhaps all of us can be doing that for the ones coming after us. And I hope it will be easier and easier for future women. So now I've got a question. I've got the same question actually for Kartina and Tonya, but I'm going to pass to you first, Kartina. So what role can men play in assisting women advance in their careers?
Oh, I mean, this is crucial, right? I mean, we all have said that in our careers, they're all supported by men and sponsored by men as well. So I think there is a crucial role for men here. And I think it's important to kind of recognize allyship. So in the professional level, allyship is very important. Aiza mentioned the boys club. So I hope that men recognize that there shouldn't be a cliqueiness of that, right? I know sometimes it's unconscious, but I think being aware of that is important. And I think there is a role to champion women, and I mentioned sponsorship is important, not mentorship. Mentorship is important as well, but sponsorship is important here. And I think linking kind of the personal to professional is important as well. Something around thinking about your daughters and your mums and your aunts and your grandmothers. Would you want your daughter to experience this? You know, if it's them in the workplace. So, you know, having that link to kind of personal experience makes it a bit more tangible, a bit more impactful. But that's the professional bit. I also want to kind of draw on the personal bit as well. I think, I mean, more and more, you know, men are taking the household and childcare responsibilities, and I think that's important. And I think it's important to encourage, you know, just really equal half of the work, right? And I know things are peaks and troughs in the personal life, but I think it is important to be part of the running of the household. And the other thing I would say as well is the mental load. The
Yes.
mental load that I'm sure people here get it. Of you know, like for example, my husband is very, very happy to support and do everything, you know, equally, but it's the mental load that is something that I think can be addressed a bit more, and not just by the men, but by us as well, by women, because sometimes I think our expectation personally is a bit higher, and you know, our way is the right way, which is, you know, I personally had to take a step back and reset my mind and my expectation on that. So an example I would bring up is my children's school communication. There's loads coming every week, and you know, I couldn't handle the load of it and the action of it and everything. So what we've agreed now, my husband and I, is he takes the first half of the month, then I take the second half of the month, and I can just completely not think about it when it comes. So it's those kind of things. Sometimes it's not visible, but it's something to address.
No, great points there, Kartina, and I can certainly not empathize, but have the same experience with the mental load. I've been there. But it's also really hard. Like, I had to let go. That was a big thing for me, being able to
exactly.
let go
Yeah.
and accept that. But now I just want to ask Tonya the same question. So what role can men play in assisting women advance in their career?
I first of all want to say I agree with everything that Kartina just shared, but maybe I'll add just a few extra points. And one of them is, I would say, to recognize that there are different leadership styles. And if you have a woman who is coming through and is very talented and very good at managing people and projects and clients or whatever, but they have a different way of leading, it does not have to replicate what you've seen or what you even do to be effective. And so to be more open and understanding that women often do have a different style, or should at least be allowed the freedom to have that different style as long as it is effective. So don't look for a mirror, look for someone who's going to be able to lead. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is to ask the women that you work with or that you manage, what are their aspirations, and make sure you're clear in understanding that it could be that they actually want to just be in the role that they are and be as successful as they can. They could have aspirations to do more. So make sure you understand and you proactively ask them if they are not sharing, and that you know where they want to go. So when opportunities come up, you know that they are part of who wants to respond to that opportunity. Which brings me to the third point. And this is a very tactical thing. If you are a male in a leadership role, you very much look around and you like to be comfortable with the people that you tap to be important members of your team. Don't do that. That is, you have to be discomfort. You have to have some discomfort and make sure that you're looking for the best person, not the person who's most comfortable for you to work with. That isn't always going to be the best person for the role. These people who you might be putting on your team are going to be managing people who aren't exactly like you. And you need a diverse team I could talk for a very long time about it. Post an opening for a job and have people apply for it. That takes more time internally, but if you have a leadership role and you continuously are disappointed that you don't have enough women in leadership roles, perhaps you need to start posting these and taking applications and interviewing people and determining who is best suited for that versus just looking around and trying to decide who you think would be most interested and be most successful. And the second thing, those would be the three things that I would say. The fourth thing, I guess, is just look around. And when you jump on your leadership team call or your team call or whatever, and it doesn't look very interesting because everyone sort of has the same profile, maybe take that as a sign that you should revert back to the first 3 points that I made. Thank you.
Well, excellent points there, Tonya. And yeah, what really resonated with me was your different seasons. So sometimes you're wanting to step up and take more on, and sometimes it's not the right time for you because of everything else going on. But yeah, to asking those questions is really important. Now I've got a few questions about gender equality, and I'm going to pass to you, Marjorie, now. How do we address the tension between creating immediate changes and then the need for long-term cultural shifts within organisations to achieve gender equality?
First, to say that both are necessary. So the short-term actions get the ball rolling, but the real change happens when culture shifts. So we need the quick wins to create momentum. We need to set targets, for example, about gender representation and leadership. We need to implement sponsorship programs for women and make hiring and promotion processes more transparent. And I know there's a lot of talk about quotas and whether they're appropriate. I think in order to get things started, sometimes we need those targets that help us to get there. But in the long term, we require bigger shifts, such as holding leaders accountable for creating inclusive environments. We need to think about how culture needs to change, ensuring gender equity and equity more broadly, and noting that it's not just about compliance, but it's about how we operate on a daily basis and how we display that in our values. And lastly, I would say we need to normalize what it means to play these caregiving roles that others have spoken about so eloquently, to remove the stigma, to ensure that women and other caregivers don't have to choose between career and family. In how organizations respond to people working flexibly will matter, for example, in how they reward and promote them.
No, great points. And yeah, it is certainly a balance between, quotas can help in the short term, but in the long term, you really do want to have that holding people accountable for what they're saying. Yeah. So I'm going to move to you, Aiza, now. What are some of the most effective strategies you've seen for accelerating gender equality in the workplace?
Okay, well, Actual Partners Consulting, we were a small firm. It wasn't planned, but I was looking at the numbers, and organically it's happened this way. But 4 out of our 6 partners are now women, and not counting our support staff, our analysts and our consultants, about half of them, male, female. So we did have a formal DEI policy, but these are the things that I think have worked well with us. So we were early adopters of flexibility in the workplace. So meaning flexible hours and the ability to work from home, right? Remote working. This means it's easier for our people to manage little ones at home and even to manage aging parents. So both gender benefits. It's not for females, right? But it's valuable, of course, to women and caregivers. And, when your parents are aging, it's typically the daughters that steps up. And I think that's perhaps why our retention of senior women are quite good in my firm. And on top of that, we have this culture of treating each other with respect. So we have activities to encourage connection. We have monthly team lunches. We have company trips. And this fosters, better connection within our people. And it also means people in the office are comfortable to speak up. And they have direct access to senior management as well, to share their needs, to share where they are. The third thing I would say would be in terms of being very fair and being transparent in terms of the remuneration process, the salaries and the promotion. So we have a consistent approach across our staff, and there's no gender bias there. So as junior student actuaries, our salary for our staff is accelerated as they pass exams, right? So salary increments are based on performance, and they're reviewed by a committee. So there's a check and balance in terms of why you think this person, deserves this or is rated as such. The other bit was the things that other speakers have been talking about in terms of the advocacy and the mentoring. As a senior partner, I'd actually look across the organization, and I noticed that some women, especially, they're very talented, but they're overlooked because they're quiet, right? So I would need to advocate for them to take on more visible roles or projects that would advance their careers. And it's, you can see that they're not comfortable, but as you've all said, that we just have to be uncomfortable for a while, and then we'll prove ourselves.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. But more formally as well, our firm, we have this annual assessment where we speak to our people and we engage with them, we discuss with them, where do you want to be? What's your exam aspiration? How does the company support you? So I would say in summary, it's listening to our people, accommodating their needs at that point, being flexible on how work is done. Work is going to get completed, but just be flexible about it. Ensure fair treatment in terms of rewards. It needs to be output-based. And that it's a bit harder to do, the mentoring and the advocacy. So that's what worked for us.
They're excellent points you have said, Aiza, and really they're the same points that would work for men and for women. It would work for everyone, what you said, but I think it's just so important, the flexibility, the respect, fair remuneration, and advocating for those who need advocating for, and so don't just ignore them. I agree with everything you've said. Now, Kartina, I'd like to ask you a question. How can organizations create a culture that not only supports gender equality, but also celebrates it?
Yeah, but this is interesting because yesterday we had an IFOA IWD event at Staple Inn, and this is one of the questions. And it's interesting about the key is, okay, we all have governance and policies, etc., to guide behaviors, and I think that's great. But I think the more important in terms of culture is the tone from the top. So the tone from the top is important. The role modeling good behaviors will, if a leader shows the behaviors that is needed, then I think everybody will follow. So things like, if a leader calls out bad behavior and reward good behavior, then it does get noticed, right? So I think that's quite important to note. And one of the things that we discussed yesterday was, well, how do you know whether the leader's just doing it as part of, because they have to, because it's in the policy, or they genuinely believe in diversity and inclusion? And you can tell, right? You can tell when so somebody's being quite genuine about it, and I think everybody can tell as well. So that's why authenticity is important. And I think the other thing is showing the right thing. So showing good examples, ensuring teams are diverse, calling out bad behaviors. I mentioned that before, and these are the things that requires kind of focus. The other thing I wanted to mention here is in order to incentivize kind of good behaviors is being part of the objectives. And I know, Marjorie, you mentioned targets and stuff, but I think it goes broader than that, because it's not just target, but it's just it's incentive around behavior. So what is it as part of the leaders' objectives that they need to kind of evidence and highlight so that they create a positive culture around diversity.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I really agree with what you're saying there about tone from the top. I think that's so important. And now, Tonya, I've got another question for you. So from your perspective as having been a leader in actuarial associations, were there any initiatives that you introduced that assisted with the engagement of young in-career female actuaries? Or else, do you think that your role as a female leader changes the perceptions of the role of women in the association?
I do remember, I don't know if you remember this, Bozenna, but we had an IAA meeting in Chicago. Do you remember that meeting?
Yes.
And we decided at that time, and I believe I was part of the inspiration for it, was to have, I'm a woman, so I don't want to take credit for anything. I always like the team credit, but we did decide to have an international, to have a women's forum. And the IA had not done this before, and they weren't really sure what we were doing and maybe even why we were doing it. But I remember when we had that forum and that we had an amazing panel of women leaders. We had young women from local universities show up in the audience, and we just had a simple discussion. That was several years ago, so now it'll be like, oh yeah, we do this all the time, right? But it was a little bit early for that, and I remember at the end the comments that we received, that the women so much appreciated that, and that we were saying things that no one had said, and having open discussions, especially on a on a global basis, people from different countries. So it was really fascinating. And I was like, aha, we do need to have this conversation. We do need to give women an opportunity. I do feel like the more you have these forums and the more you do these, it allows women to see that what's in their head isn't just in their head. And they kind of have bodies and faces and voices to all these things that they feel like they're dealing with, and they're like, yeah, you are dealing with that, but it isn't impossible, and here's some strategies, and here's what I'm doing, and hey, even reach out to me. I've had women connect with me afterwards and creative mentoring situations out of it and that type of thing, paying it forward, so to speak. So I think just simply having these discussions and helping women hear other women, at least validate what they're going through, if not giving them some ideas and inspirations for how they can kind of maneuver through this still male-dominated world, is important. The other thing I did was we had the Conference of Consulting Actuaries, of course, focuses on consulting actuaries, and they're very focused on continuing education, but they decided to pivot and also do a little bit more in building community, which I thought was a great idea. And I looked at the communities and I thought, well, one thing that we could really use is a women in consulting community, and toss that idea out there. A lot of times when you toss things out, they toss back and you end up leading these things. So, that happened. But I ended up creating this women in consulting community. And it was the same experience. The leadership for the CCA was like, I don't know, this seems kind of weird, really. And then after we launched it, we started having events, and they saw how much the women memberships of that association appreciated it. Just again, having that opportunity to interact with women and just hear different ideas and journeys was very inspiring, and also built that community. And a lot of women have created a network of other women that they can go to and learn from. So those two things kind of stand out in my mind. I think you also asked if, yeah, I think I answered that. I do think that my role as a female leader did have a difference. Like I said, we've had so many amazing women presidents at so many associations now. But when I became president, there wasn't that many. And a lot of times you get busy just doing your thing, and you get stopped by someone in the hall and they're like, thank you. I finally see someone who looks like me on that stage, in that leadership role, and that's very inspiring. So I do think that it did matter, but there was a lot of other things going on. We are all lifting the profession together. But yeah, I do think it matters. Thanks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the initiative, and thank you for doing those things. And I'm sure many, many women have benefited from what you have done there, Tonya. So that's really great. And it's really important, like you said this earlier when you were talking, to normalize the woman's voice, and that this is our way of doing things, and it's okay. and it's different to the men's way, and you can be a gentle speaker and you can speak this way or that way. There's no right way or wrong way, as long as you're actually effective in getting the outcome.
It could be better, Bozenna. It could be better.
But no, so it's really good. And I know we're almost up at the hour, but maybe we've got time for one more question.
We do have a couple of questions that were submitted. I don't know if you want to do those or if you want to pivot to.
Yeah, we can have a quick look at those. Well, I will I'll have a quick look at them and you can see whether you want to address them or not. The first one that's come through is, how should we react or respond to the current US government policy on removing diversity, equity, inclusion in formal policy? Does anyone want to speak to that?
It's dangerous ground, but I will attempt it very briefly and say that we can name things or we can do the right things. And I don't think that doing the right things comes with penalties.
Perfectly said, Marjorie. That's
Yeah.
perfectly said. Policies are policies, but actions are what drives what we're doing in an organization. I will say also a lot of this diversity, equity, and inclusion, erasing it from policies. I think a lot of that is in financial statements. And I think that there's a little bit more of a chatter about something that isn't as really reflected within organizations, although there are some organizations making real changes. So I would just like to say that as well. But at the end of the day, what's most important is when you're sitting at your desk and in your role, what are you doing? You know, not what does the policy say you should do, but what are you actually really doing? That's what matters.
And I think a number of you have actually said that in what you have been saying so far too. So, yeah. Well, the other question in the chat was, what an impressive panel. And yes, I agree. You all absolutely are. And please discuss any advantages that women can have in the actuarial profession. So would any of you like to respond on that one?
I might try that actually. Look, I think, you know, we're different and we should celebrate it. And I think celebrate your differences and be proud of it, because we're good at different things, and quite a lot of things are something that contributes to kind of the totality of the leadership skill set. So I think that's something to focus on. The other thing I would say is the positive of us is we're not just the technical or technicians, right? We're good at the non-technical stuff, the EQ stuff, the relationship, the making connections, and I think we should also focus on that, because that's what makes us whole, and that's actually our USP, really.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kartina. Well, I do want to finish in a couple of minutes, because to respect people's time, to finish on the hour. But does anyone want to make any closing comments before I wrap up?
I'll just say, Bozenna, that we've talked about a lot of the external environment that kind of helps or hinders women. I think there's an inside job to consider as well about bringing your best self to the workplace and showcasing what you're capable of, not being afraid to shine. And I think that's up to us to step up and do, because nobody else will.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Marjorie. And on that note, oh, did you want to say something?
Sorry, but I just wanted to add to Marjorie's point about being bold and getting used to being uncomfortable. And having that growth mindset is something that will benefit quite a lot of people.
Well, thank you, Kartina, too.
And just one last thing, Bozenna, don't include women because it's the right thing to do. Do it because we make the teams better.
Yes.
It is a better team when you have women and gender diverse team. So
yeah, all diversity, it makes things better. Yeah. Well, on that note, thank you very much for coming along today. Thank you very much for sharing your views. I have certainly learned a lot from you, and I hope our listeners have too. And I really appreciate you all spending the time with us. And I hope that everyone has a fantastic International Women's Day.
thank you, Bozenna.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.